The first time Ava Bennett met him, he was standing in the rain beside a black town car, with his sleeves rolled to his elbows, trying to calm a terrified old man who had collapsed on the sidewalk. Nobody else stopped. People rushed past beneath umbrellas, coffee cups in hand, eyes fixed ahead like compassion had become too inconvenient for modern life. Cars splashed water onto the curb. Horns blared through downtown Manhattan. Somewhere above them, giant digital billboards flashed celebrity gossip produced by the very media company Ava worked for. But the driver stayed kneeling in the rain. "It's okay, sir," he said softly, supporting the trembling stranger with one arm. "You're not alone." Something about the way he said it made Ava stop walking. Not out of curiosity, out of guilt, because she almost kept going too. Ava hurried toward them, dropping to her knees beside the older man, while rain soaked through her coat instantly. "I'm calling an ambulance." The driver looked up at her then, and for a second the entire noise of the city seemed to disappear. His eyes were calm, warm. The kind of eyes that made people feel safe without understanding why. Together, they stayed with the man until paramedics arrived. When it was over, Ava realized her hands were shaking from the cold. The driver pulled off his own jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders before she could protest. "You'll freeze," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "I'll survive." She should have walked away after that. Instead, she found herself standing beside him beneath the awning outside her office. Building 20 minutes later, still wearing his jacket while steam rose from the streets around them. "You work here?" she asked. He nodded toward the towering glass skyscraper. "Mostly driving executives around." Ava laughed weakly. "That sounds exhausting." "You have no idea." There was something strange about him. Not flashy, not arrogant. The opposite, actually. While most men in Manhattan tried too hard to impress people, this man seemed completely comfortable being invisible. "What's your name?" she asked. "Daniel." "Ava!" "Nice to meet you, Ava." It should have ended there, but life has a strange habit of bringing lonely people back together, especially the kind ones. 3 weeks later, Ava saw Daniel again outside the headquarters of Sterling Media Group, the billion-dollar media empire where she worked as a junior editor. She was carrying 2 overloaded boxes of archived files while trying not to cry after being humiliated by her supervisor in front of the entire office. "Maybe if you spent less time daydreaming and more time thinking, you wouldn't make mistakes," her boss had snapped. Ava had apologized even though the mistake wasn't hers, because that's what survival looked like sometimes. She nearly dropped the boxes when she heard a familiar voice. "Need help?" Daniel stood beside the loading dock holding an umbrella over both of them. Relief hit her harder than expected. "You're stalking me now?" She joked quietly. "Terrible driving schedule," he replied. "I keep ending up here." He carried the heavier box without asking. And somehow, during that short walk through the underground parking garage, Ava told him more about her life than she had told anyone in years. About losing her mother, about supporting her younger brother through college, about working 80-hour weeks while executives upstairs made millions, publishing shallow stories about celebrity divorces and scandals. Daniel listened carefully. Really listened. Not the fake kind of listening people did while waiting for their turn to speak. The real kind. "You know what your problem is?" he asked gently. Ava sighed. "Please tell me." "Apparently everyone else already knows. You think being strong means carrying everything alone." The words hit too close to home. She looked away quickly before he noticed her eyes watering. Over the next few months, Daniel became the safest part of her life. Some nights he drove her home after late shifts when the subway felt dangerous. Other nights they shared cheap street tacos from a food truck while sitting on a bench overlooking the Hudson River. He never bragged, never interrupted, never made her feel small, which was why Ava found herself falling for a man she believed was simply a hard-working driver trying to survive. New York City like everyone else. And honestly, that made her love him more. Because after years around powerful men in expensive suits, kindness felt far more attractive than status ever could. Then came the night everything shattered. Sterling Media announced its annual charity gala, a glamorous event attended by celebrities, politicians, and elite business leaders. Ava hated those events. They were less about helping people and more about Wealthy executives competing over who looked generous in photographs. Still, attendance was mandatory. Ava spent an hour searching discount racks for a dress she could barely afford. When she arrived at the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers glittered above crowds dripping in diamonds and designer tuxedos. Waiters floated through the room carrying champagne worth more than her monthly rent. She felt invisible immediately, until she heard the whispers. "The CEO is finally coming. I heard he's impossibly private. Nobody's seen him in months." Ava barely paid attention. She was too busy, trying not to embarrass herself around people who treated wealth like a personality trait. Then the ballroom doors opened, and her entire world stopped. Daniel walked inside wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, not beside the executives, in front of them. The room erupted into applause. Ava stared at him in confusion as Sterling, media's board members, surrounded him instantly. One of them raised a champagne glass proudly. "To Daniel Sterling," the man announced, "the visionary CEO of Sterling Media Group." The glass slipped from Ava's fingers. It shattered across the marble floor. Daniel looked toward the sound immediately, and the moment his eyes found hers, his expression changed. Not guilt, fear, real fear, as if losing her mattered more than the billions attached to his name. Ava couldn't breathe. The driver, the late-night taco companion, the man who listened to her talk about overdue bills and impossible dreams, was the billionaire owner of the entire company. Humiliation burned through her chest. Every vulnerable thing she shared suddenly felt pathetic. "You lied to me," she whispered when he finally reached her outside the ballroom. Rain poured across the city again, just like the night they met. "I never wanted to hurt you. You let me believe you were someone else." Daniel's jaw tightened painfully. "I let you believe I was normal. You're a CEO. I'm still Daniel." "No," she said, tears mixing with rainwater. "You're someone who could have told me the truth at any moment." She walked away before he could answer. And for the first time in months, New York felt cold again. The next week at work was unbearable. Everyone suddenly treated Ava differently after rumors spread about her connection to the CEO. Co-workers who once ignored her now forced fake smiles. Executives invited her into meetings she'd never been considered important enough to attend before. It made her sick. Then came the layoffs. Sterling Media announced massive cuts after acquiring another company. Hundreds of employees panicked overnight. Ava watched single parents cry quietly at their desks. She watched security escort people out carrying cardboard boxes, filled with their lives, and anger toward Daniel grew sharper inside her, until she accidentally overheard something that changed everything. "He refused the layoffs," one executive hissed during a meeting. "The board overruled him," another scoffed. "He wanted to use his personal fortune to keep employees paid." Completely irrational. Ava froze outside the conference room. "What about the emergency housing program?" someone asked. Daniel answered this time. His voice sounded exhausted. "Approved immediately. Any employee struggling with rent receives support anonymously. No publicity. That could cost millions." "Then it cost millions." Silence followed. Then Daniel spoke again, quieter this time. "People are not disposable." Something cracked open inside Ava then, because suddenly she remembered every tiny thing about him. How he knew the names of janitors. How cafeteria workers smiled when he walked by. How security guards spoke to him like family. Daniel hadn't pretended to be kind. He simply was. That night, Ava found him alone in the company parking garage. Ironically, beside the same town car where they first met. "You really were a driver?" she said softly. A faint smile touched his face. "Sometimes I still need to escape being the CEO." She stepped closer slowly. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel looked down for a moment before answering. "Because every time people learn who I am, they stop seeing me." His voice cracked slightly. "But you saw me before the money." The vulnerability in his eyes hurt more than the lie ever had. "I grew up poor, Ava. My father drove trucks until his body gave out. After I built the company, wealthy people suddenly acted like I mattered. But the second they think you have power, they stop being honest with you. And me? You treated me like a human being when you thought I had nothing." Tears filled Ava's eyes unexpectedly, because she finally understood. The disguise had never been about deception. It had been loneliness. Daniel stepped closer carefully, like she might still walk away. "I fell in love with you on the first day," he admitted quietly. "In the rain, when you stopped to help someone everyone else ignored." Ava laughed through tears. "You fell in love with me looking like a drowned raccoon?" "You looked human," he whispered. "That's rare in this city." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Ava wrapped her arms around him, and Daniel held her like someone who had spent years carrying the weight of the world alone. The rain poured harder around them. And sometimes the greatest thing a person can do is see the humanity inside. Someone everyone else only sees for their title.